As we all know, the beginning of the year is full of this sense of I need to make some sort of resolution. I'm going to be the new me, the better me, all of these things that tend to come up in January. And sometimes they stick and sometimes they fall off. This year, I have been thinking, and actually have been thinking for the past few months about the way that I kind of want to steer the ship in my life, not just my business, not just my family life, but like kind of an umbrella over everything, where this year I really want to focus on not doing more, but doing what I am doing better. So, you could use the word optimize if you wanted to make it sound kind of businessy. I tend to be someone who runs in a lot of directions and gets big ideas and starts to chase them, rather than kind of looking at where I am and figuring out how I can make those things better. So I've been thinking about how this is going to show up practically in my life. And I figured that maybe sharing a little bit of my thought process on this and what I'm going to be doing this year might help you come up with a solution that I think, at least here I am at the outset of it, I think that this feels really doable to me. And so I am committing in this way. And I wanted to invite you to consider doing the same if you don't already have kind of a plan for how you are going to achieve your goals for 2024.
Welcome to This Can't Be That Hard. My name is Anami Tonkin, and I help photographers run profitable, sustainable businesses that they love. Each week on the podcast, I cover simple, actionable strategies and systems that photographers at every level of experience can use to earn more money in a more sustainable way. Running a photography business doesn't have to be that hard. You can do it, and I can show you how.
So as with most of my goals, the way that I tend to figure out how I'm going to accomplish them is working backward, right? So you think of where you want to be at the end of the year, think of what, big goals you have for 12 months from now, and then you break it down backward into, what do I need to accomplish in a quarter? What do I need to accomplish in a month, in a week? What do I need to accomplish today in order to set me on that path? And that's a really great exercise that I encourage you to do, because oftentimes big goals require sort of a series of steps. And it's like, this is step one. And after you complete step one, then there's a different step that you need to achieve. But at the same time, I think that most goals, most changes, big changes that occur, tend to have some sort of single unit or basic component that those changes require on essentially a daily basis. So let's take, health, like eating whole foods. Let's say I'm making stuff up here. If you say by the end of this year, I want to run a marathon, then every day, obviously you're going to have a training program for running that varies over time. So right now, maybe you don't run at all. And so you're walking and you're trying to build up to being able to run 3 miles by the end of January. That's great. That will change by the end of Q1. Maybe you're running a 5K. By the end of Q2, you're running a 10K, et cetera, et cetera. I've never trained for a marathon. I don't really know what's involved. And I definitely don't want to find out. But if you are training for a marathon over the course of the year, you're also going to need to probably feed your body fuel that is not garbage, right? So maybe you are trying to cut sugar out, or you are trying to cut soft drinks out, or you're trying to add whole foods into your daily diet, or leafy greens into your daily diet. Again, I'm kind of making this up, but if you think about it, it makes sense that if you've got a big physical goal by the end of the year, you also need to take care of the other components in your life that will help that goal. So if we change the example here into something like, we'll focus on business. If you want by the end of the year to grow your social media following to 1,000 people on Instagram, or, whatever your goal is. And the thing is, again, if you only have 5 followers on Instagram right now and you want to get to 1,000, it's probably going to require more than you just showing up. Maybe you're going to take a course, or maybe you are going to also start a podcast or a blog that's going to feed people toward your Instagram account. Those are bigger kinds of activities that are going to require time, money, energy, all that sort of stuff. But at the core, you still have to show up every day. So what I want to talk about today is that, and I'm calling it my 10-minute commitment. What can I commit to in 10 minutes a day that is essentially the same activity every single day between now and the end of the year, where if I do that, let's say 5 days a week, then if I don't hit the goal that I've got, or if I don't achieve all of the things, the big things, if I still show up 50 minutes a week in 10-minute segments, I will make significant progress toward that goal. So 10 minutes a day. What can we do in 10 minutes a day that will be beneficial to us? And it depends on what your total goals are, but off the top of my head, that could be meditating for 10 minutes. It could be reading a book. It could be reading a business book. It could be flossing your teeth, calling a friend if you are, committed to strengthening your interpersonal relationships this year. It could be strength training. You could certainly send an email in 10 minutes a day. And obviously we all send emails every day. So that's not so much like some big habit, but maybe you're being really intentional about the people that you're sending an email to. Maybe you are reaching out to local business owners, or, you're doing some sort of PR campaign where you're trying to get connections. And so every single day you sit down and you commit to sending an email, or in 10 minutes, you might be able to send 2 if you're using some sort of template, right? So I think that those kinds of activities, the ones that are just like, they don't really feel like they get you anywhere in the moment, but over time, the compounding effect really starts to show up in a difference that is made. That's what I'm looking for. I am looking to just set aside 10 minutes a day. We all have 10 minutes a day to do something that by the end of the year will make a big impact. It's one of those where I'm like, future me will really appreciate it if I spend 10 minutes doing push-ups every day this year. I will be stronger. So some good practices for how to start ensuring that this happens, the things that I am planning on trying to put together. Number 1 is, of course, just associating that 10-minute task with something that you do every day. So if it's something like reading a business book, maybe you do that when you sit down for your cup of coffee in the morning. If it is meditating, maybe it's the thing that you do first thing when you wake up, or the last thing that you do before you go to bed. So all of these are ways to just trigger that habitual kind of process so that it's not like you have to remember every day to do that activity, because everything that we have to put effort toward, put brain power toward, becomes less and less likely to actually happen. So associate it with something that you do every day. You could, if you needed to, just set a recurring timer on your phone so that it, reminds you. If it's like, maybe you're going to do a self-portrait 5 days a week for the year. Like maybe you're interested in doing a 365 project, which would be 7 days a week. But, that's something that, again, you want to either associate that with some sort of activity, or if you can't do that for some reason, you could just make it that it happens at the same time every day. The other thing that I'm doing, and I have heard this sort of practice in a handful of different places. The first place that I ever came across it was one of my kids' elementary school teachers did like the pom-poms in the jar, and she used it as a reward where she would add pom-poms, and when the jar filled up, then they got a pizza party. I have 2 jars sitting on my desk. One currently has 2 pom-poms in it. But the point is that I started out with 260 pom-poms in the one jar and 0 pom-poms in the other. And my plan is that every day when I complete my 10-minute task, I am going to move one of those pom-poms over into the other jar. The goal is that at the end of the year, the jars have switched. So the one that started full is now empty, and the one that's empty is now full. And I feel like what's nice about that is that not only does it give us that like micro dopamine hit to be like, ooh, I get to move my pom-pom, but it also is a visual cue. Like this colorful jar on my desk reminds me like, okay, if I get to the end of the day and I haven't done that 10-minute task, I'm going to make sure that I do it. The other thing that I'm planning on doing, and you could take or leave this strategy, is I'm actually adding a second 50-minute task to the end of each week. So this is one of those where I am looking at some habits or some kind of recurring tasks take longer than 10 minutes. And so it's a little harder if you're, breaking your project down or your goal down and you say, okay, well, 10 minutes a day, of course, is going to help me in some way. But maybe I also want to add this 50-minute task. So again, I'm using a 10-minute a day. I'm just lumping that all together in a single day. So by blocking off 50 minutes a week, you can give yourself the opportunity to write a blog post. You could give yourself the opportunity, instead of just reaching out to local business owners, right, or vendors or something like that. In addition to that, if you're doing that every day, one day a week, you could put on your calendar like you're going to get together with a local business owner. So 50 minutes is enough time to have a cup of coffee with somebody, or, get in your car and drive to their business and say, hey, and have a little bit of that FaceTime. You could record a podcast. I do this in about 50 minutes each week. You could do your meal planning for the week. Like, there are all different kinds of tasks that take longer than 10 minutes. But if they're a complementary activity and you coordinate that with the thing that you're doing for 10 minutes every day, you're just going to make that much more progress. So same rules apply here. You're going to want to try and schedule it for the same time each week. You're going to try and trigger it to something that you're already doing. Maybe, you do your meal planning after you drop your kids off for school on Mondays, or you have coffee with people every week on Tuesday morning. You get in the car and go to the coffee shop and you've invited people each week, whatever the case may be. And you can use that same jar trick, or whatever. We're all creative. So you can do something really fun where you have a stack of 52 of your favorite photos sitting on your desk. And every time that you complete that weekly activity, you can hang that, one of those photos on your wall. And by the end of the year, you've got this like really fun wall full of photos, whatever might give you that ping and that visual representation that keeps you going. I feel like building those intentions and tying them to sort of like a process really helps me stick with them. I'm a bit, even like right down to making a checklist or having a calendar that I'm crossing off the dates. Like, that is a time-tested way to keep us sort of visually engaged and motivated. And I think that as visual people, those things are particularly helpful for us. And then the last little trick I wanted to give you is something that I was talking to my son the other day about that I have always done. And he was like, "Whoa, that's awesome." And I was like, well, maybe most adults know this, but I figured I would say it anyway. I use Google Calendars. I use them to death. Mine looks like, an explosion of confetti. There's all kinds of colors and all kinds of things. And I live by that calendar, and it is wonderful. This came up the other day because I don't know if you guys have been in business long enough and have been taking credit cards long enough. There was that, multi-billion-dollar settlement with Visa and MasterCard, and they sent out the envelopes with like your own personal QR code, and you had to log in, and you were supposed to like fill out some paperwork, and then you become one of the recipients of the payout. And I had gotten that, and at first I was like, what is this spam? I almost threw it away, but then I realized it was legit. I did some like research to make sure that I wasn't being pulled into some sort of phishing thing. And I filled out the paperwork and submitted it, but the due date on that isn't until May 31st. And then I'm sure the payouts will happen like after that. And so I went into my calendar, my Google Calendar, and at the end of June or July, I made a note to myself with a photo of that piece of mail so that I could reference what I was talking about, and said, go check what your payout is supposed to be and when that's going to come in and all this sort of thing. And I do that all the time. If I have a conversation with an insurance person and I need to follow back up with them, I just go and make notes in my calendar in the future about what I need to do. And I try and give it as much context as possible. So if that includes uploading a photo or any of those kinds of things, that just really helps me. It reminds future me of what past me was trying to get future me to do. So anyway, in this case, in the case of this goal, this long-term goal, I want you to go definitely to the end of the year and put a note to yourself to check in. And if you have achieved if all of your pom-poms have been moved over, then I want you to say, go out and treat yourself to a spa day or whatever might feel like a reward for doing all that stuff. But just knowing that is on my calendar for future me to look at, it's almost like having my own accountability buddy. And you can do that. You can do it certainly at the end of the year, but you can also do it quarterly or monthly or whatever else. If you have this intention today, and you know that if you accomplish this for the whole year, you will make huge progress, you want to stick to that. And so giving yourself these check-in dates, whatever, and I encourage you to do more than just the end of the year because it's easy to fall off. But if it's every month, hey, if you've moved 4 pom-poms in your weekly thing, then you get to whatever the case may be. I do think that building little rewards in for yourself is a nice motivator, but even just knowing that that check is coming, I think can be hugely helpful. So I feel like this was a little rambly and I apologize for that, but I have been thinking about this a lot. And I hope that if you are also thinking about the goals that you want to achieve and the things that you want to do this year, but you're having a hard time or you have in the past had a hard time sticking with those goals, I hope that I've given you some strategies today that can help you. And I, for one, am very excited to see all the progress you make this year and beyond.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of This Can't Be That Hard. I'll be back same time, same place next week. In the meantime, you can find more information about this episode, along with all the relevant links, notes, and downloads at thiscan'tbethathard.com/learn. If you like the podcast, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Even better, share the love by leaving a review in iTunes. And as always, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic week.